Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. This is Ben Kinney. Today I'm joined with Chad Himes and Bob Stewart. What's the number one thing that holds us back in our lives? The thing that creates our limits, the thing that determines our trajectory. For me, it's always been my brain. And today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the brain. And I just want to be upfront with you all and let you know that we are highly unqualified for this conversation.
Amen.
Right? We are by no means qualified to talk about the brain, but it's something that I feel like is holding me back from becoming my potential. Now, why are we unqualified for this conversation? James Watson said the brain is the most complex thing we have yet to discover in our universe. With all the things that the world has figured out, they've yet to figure out entirely how does the brain work. So we sat back to ask ourselves the question today, is the brain a muscle? Is it something that can be changed? What impact can we have on it? Enjoy today's journey where we dive into scientific studies, observations, quotes, and other nonsense related to the brain.
So Ben, there's a quote, and I got to read this one a little slowly to make sure everyone gets this as they're listening to it. It says, if the human brain were so simple that we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't.
Say that one more time.
Yeah, I'm going to say it again because I can see Bob's face while we're recording this going, huh? Okay. If the human brain were so simple that we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't. And that is just going to twist our heads for hours as we think about it, Ben. Let me put this question to you. Is the brain a muscle?
You know, thank goodness, Chad, that the brain is complex. It allows us to sit back here and wonder and have this drive to go learn things and be better versions of ourselves. And yet it's a safe that's never been cracked, right? And the brain anatomically is not a muscle. It contains a little bit of muscle, some of us more than others. It's predominantly made of what they call gray and white matter. It just cells combined together that function different than a muscle. However, there are many reasons why people compare it to a muscle. Inside the outer layers of your brain, the cortex, there are billions of tiny little nerve cells. We call those neurons.
Okay.
The nerve cells have branches connecting them to other cells in a complicated network. Everything's connected, right?
Got it.
Communication between these cells is what allows us to think and solve problems.
I have communication issues sometimes.
Indeed.
Yes.
See, when you learn new things, these tiny connections in the brain actually multiply and get stronger, like a
muscle.
Like a muscle.
Got it,
Exactly.
okay.
See, the more you challenge your brain to learn,
Yep.
the more the cells in your brain grow.
Okay.
The things that we once found very hard or even impossible to do,
Like calculus.
or as simple as speaking as a baby or as a young child,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Or riding a bike or whatever that might be, right? They actually become easier.
Got it.
The result is a stronger and smarter brain.
So this is where that muscle conversation people bring up to it, because just like, hey, if I'm going to do bicep curls, I'm going to be stronger. If I'm going to run or whatever, I'm going to get faster. So I can improve my brain functions even though it's not classified as a muscle.
Yeah, you know, most people think about intelligence as something that you're born with or you're predetermined to have. You know,
We sure all missed out on that one.
I know I've heard this many times because I've said it myself. As I'm not really a math person,
Right.
right? And do you have anything that you're not really, Bob?
I'm not an English person.
That's why we bring Bob around for the math. And, well,
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to do for English around here.
What are you not, Chad?
The rest of it.
See, research is continuing to show that although technically the brain is not a muscle, it behaves like one
Right.
because you either use it or you lose it. that it gets stronger over time.
Got it.
Scientists have shown it many, many times. Just like when you're lifting weights, right? Or in our world, Bob, right? We're doing push-ups.
Yeah.
We start and we can only do 20 push-ups, but you fast forward at the end of a crisis, right? And we can do double, triple, quadruple, or like Chad, a lot more push-ups. Because that muscle, it just becomes stronger and stronger. I don't know if you guys have ever worked out really hard and then stopped for a couple weeks or a month and you realize how fast that muscle goes away. I think the same thing happens with the brain. Imagine like how long it's been since you took a test. And then you go back to taking a test and you realize that you just lost those skills. That's why people say use your brain or lose it. Most people don't think about their brain like a muscle, though. They don't treat it like a muscle. They don't work it like a muscle. They don't come up with ways to practice, use, or improve that muscle. We did a little bit of digging to find examples of this non-muscle called the brain growing. And was there any scientific research out there that said if you use your brain, quotation mark, muscle, right, it would actually grow? And we found one example.
Yeah, this is amazing, this example.
Yeah. I don't know how many people out there have ever been to London, but when you're in London, if you have the opportunity to jump in these cars are painted black, they're called the black cab service, right? These cabs, they're incredible. Their service and their knowledge is like no other. And if you've ever been to London, what you know is that those streets, they're like a bunch of spaghetti dumped on the floor. It's super confusing.
So no logic to it like some of the cities that are laid out in a great grid pattern that makes a lot of sense, like New York City. London was road just built on top of road, and they just kind of fit them where they could.
Yeah,
Okay.
Avoiding all the historical buildings and castles and rivers and all these other things, right?
Got it.
And these cab drivers, these taxi drivers, they have to figure out what is the fastest route between any 2 points
Waze.
based on the time of day, right? The exact location. So many of the people that get into the cab, they don't know what street or what corner or the address to say, I want to go to this pub or this gallery or this restaurant. To earn a license in the UK as a cab driver, they're going to spend, Bob, 3 to 4 years driving around the city on mopeds, memorizing thousands and thousands of streets, all the restaurants, tourist attractions, parks, businesses. And I've been blessed to travel a lot of places in the world, and I've never seen anything like it. In order to get their license, they have to pass this grueling exam where less than 50% of the people actually pass.
Yeah, I was reading about this, Ben. You can't actually fail it. You either pass it or you quit attempting it. They don't actually fail anybody. You might not earn the points on that time you've taken the test, yet they'll never fail you. They will continue to give you the opportunity again and again and again if you want to train that muscle, air quotes, the brain that you were talking about, until you either pass or just give up.
Which is interesting. That means over 50% of them are just giving up. They just realize, I can't do this thing.
Because it's that hard. But of those that succeed, Bob, they've mastered the memorization, right? They've lodged in their brain how to get to all these places, the names of these places, the best routes, etc.
Just think about it, Ben. If I put you on the spot right now and said, you're at your office and you're going home, without getting in your car right now, I want you to tell me exactly how to get there, and I want you to tell me the highlights of the attractions you would pass along the way.
And the names of the streets.
Yeah,
Each
every street
that
name
you turn onto.
Yeah, I want you to tell me which way you turn, and I want you to tell me all the bars that you pass on the way by name so you know them. And that's a drive you and our listeners make almost every day. They're going to their kids' school. They're going back and forth to regular places, and they probably couldn't do it. And there's over 25,000 streets in this London area.
I'm sitting here thinking right now, like my boys' Montessori school is a mile from, not even a mile, half a mile from my house, and there's a little bar that sits right across the street. I've driven past that thing 1,000 times. I couldn't tell you the name of it right now. I literally couldn't tell you the name of it.
This is amazing.
I have 2 routes to get home. One is a good day, and one is a bad day. And the bad day takes a left on Woburn and a right on Iowa, and it pulls into the Dairy Queen for a peanut butter parfait.
See, that he knows in detail how to get
And
there.
then you continue up State Street, right, until you get home. A
Right.
good day goes directly to the freeway. Anyway, I get your point.
Or we could have you just turn right and keep going who knows where.
Right.
That's
So-
a whole different story.
We probably should get back on task here. There was a neuroscientist, an Eleanor McGuire, and she was for the University College of London.
Yep.
And she was studying animals in memory. And through some series of events, right, she decided that she would study humans. What she found in animals, though, was interesting. That there was certain animals that had better memory. They would remember where they buried food, right, where they were first born, or how to return back to a nest, right? And they memorized all these different locations. When they did research into those animals, they found that there was a difference in the shape and size of different parts of the brains of those animals. She wanted to go off and study humans who rely heavily on memory, which led her to the London cab drivers. What McGuire discovered was that London taxi drivers had an enlarged, how do we say this, hippocampy?
Yep.
Right.
The hippocampus in their brain.
Yeah. Compared to other people, similar of age, education, but of those that did not drive taxis. In other words, she had found that taxi drivers had a muscle that grew over time to be larger, physically, actually measurably larger with an MRI, right, scan of the brain.
So their brain was like Schwarzenegger biceps. I mean,
That's
literally
right,
larger.
that's right. It actually grew bigger. So she thought maybe the people that passed the exam had to have a bigger area hippocampus, right, of the brain, and that's why that happened. So she started studying individuals who were just about to start becoming the journey, 3 or 4 year journey to become a cab driver. And she found that they all had about the same size brain in those specific areas
In the beginning.
in the beginning. But of those that passed 4 years later, there was a dramatic difference.
Wow.
What does that tell you, Chad?
That it actually can grow as they use this muscle. Again, we'll put air quotes around it. As they used this muscle, it actually grew larger.
What are you thinking, Bob?
It's fascinating. I think I would just sit here and look and think, I memorize stuff. My brain's a certain size and I can only fit so much in there. I would never think it actually grows, right? There's extra neurons being created, extra pathways in the brain, and it's fattening up so to make room for all this extra knowledge I have to stuff in there. I'm not just stuffing knowledge into the same size brain. That's fascinating to me. I would have never thought that.
Now, one of the things you were saying earlier, Ben, was, again, muscles, we use it or we lose it, right? You were talking about that. I'm interested because I was reading about this as well when we were talking about this before we got to recording. And they said that after they retired, the cab drivers, their hippocampus actually shrunk back down to normal size.
Wow. You don't use it.
You don't use it, you're going to lose it. You're going to revert back to where you were. It was interesting that the brain actually functioned just like any other muscle in the body in that regard.
In the article that I read, I think it was Scientific American, which I read their news feed from time to time. They quoted another neurobiologist, Howard Eichenbaum. I don't know. Anyway,
We'll give you
something
credit
Baum,
for it, sure.
From the Boston University. I'll just read his quote. He says, "But it turns out it really was the training process that caused the growth in the brain. It shows you can produce profound changes in the brain with training, and that's a big deal. What were you going to say, Bob?
Well, I was going to say, it makes me think of, you hinted earlier on like learning a language, or those cab drivers. I bet a lot of those people, they grew up there. So they already had this foundation of knowledge in London, right? It's hard for me to imagine somebody just came in, dropped in the middle of that environment and tried to learn 25,000 streets in all the cities and all that stuff. But so they had this kind of baseline set already. It makes me think of young children that learn a language. Right? They like my kids right now are learning Spanish from one of their teachers as a 2-year-old, and you pick up languages earlier, more easily.
Yes.
Which allows you then later into life to pick up other languages more easily, right? You're building on this foundation early. And I think there's something to the idea that like you don't have a bunch of other stuff in there. It'd be hard for me to believe a New York cab driver could go to London with all that other stuff they had in their brain, right? And then really do what these guys in London have done. So I don't wonder if like having a blank slate almost, so to speak, right, makes it a little bit easier even to then practice the right way and build your memory in the right fashion.
I feel like Chad had a pretty blank slate when I met him. So
yeah. Look what
I haven't
he is today.
changed.
He's amazing.
Haven't really changed much.
I was trying to give you some credit.
I appreciate that, Bob. You know, it's interesting because I think, Bob, what you're taking with our young kids and how impressionable they are, and how many kids do grow up to be great at math or great at music or great at something, and it's probably because they've been studying it again and again and again. And whether they're physically growing the muscle in size in their head, they're definitely growing that muscle. I mean, a musician, a trumpet player, they definitely have stronger lung capacity. They've grown that muscle. I'm sure they're also growing their brain muscle because I can't read music. I used to speak French, yet I haven't used it in so many years. I could probably whip off a sentence or two that didn't get me slapped, and that would be about it. Because again, you don't use it, you're gonna lose it in the world of muscle.
I want to go through a couple more studies that we dug out, and I'm just going to read you a little bit of this one because one, I think it's kind of sad, and two, it's going to motivate us to make some changes with our pets. So it said, how do we know that the brain can grow stronger? Scientists started thinking that the human brain could develop and change when they studied animals' brains. They found out that animals who lived in a challenging environment with other animals and toys to play with were different from animals who lived alone in bare cages. While animals who lived alone just ate and slept all the time, the ones who lived with different toys and other animals were always active. They spent a lot of time figuring out how to use toys and how to get along with other animals. These animals, the ones who had the toys and people to interact with, right, had more connections between the nerve cells in their brains. The connections were bigger and stronger. In fact, their whole brains were about 10% heavier than the brains of animals who lived alone without toys. The animals who were exercising their brains by playing with toys and each other were also smarter. They were better at solving problems and learning new things. Even old animals, when studied, got smarter and developed more connections in their brains when they got the chance to play with new toys and other animals. When scientists put very old animals in cages with younger animals and new toys to explore, their brains also grew by 10%. Now, before you guys comment, because I know you guys have something to say about this, like, we all need to stop on the way home and buy some toys for some animals. I'm feeling guilty already. Like, this might explain why my golden retriever is so dumb.
We have enough toys around our house. Our dog has chosen which ones she wants to play with. But this is, as you're sharing this, Ben, all I'm thinking is the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And absolutely you can, according to this. Because they're saying even when they take the older dogs and give them these opportunities, their brain can still grow. And when they put them with the younger, the brain can still grow.
Here's the scary part about what you said. You said something earlier, but I'm not good at math, right? Most of us stop learning.
Well, that's why we keep you around again.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. Most of us stop learning at the end of our traditional schooling, right? We come out of high school, or maybe we were fortunate enough to go to college, and we come out of there and we go into a job, and we really stop learning. Maybe we learn that job and all of the kind of the activities in that job, but we stop learning. And it almost leads you to believe like you can't teach an old dog new tricks because that old dog decided he's going to stop learning, right? Like I know what I know and I know what I've known. If the old dog is forced, like in some of these studies, right? They're not just taking the old dog and going, go play with that toy and he can or he can't. They like put him in a cage with that toy, right? He's like forced to interact with that toy and engage. As humans, we have the choice to decide, I'm not good at math. I'm not going to learn that thing, right? And the reality is you've probably gone so long without learning, it's not even a thing you do anymore.
The statistics are ridiculous as to when we get out of high school, how few books the average person reads. So we're not learning anymore. We're letting that brain start to shrink from all that growth that was being brought on.
Netflixing and chilling.
Yeah, basically. What we know is there's study after study that says whether you're an adult or a child, if you use your brain, the brain's going to grow. Chad, why don't you just read us a little bit of the study we found about adults and juggling.
Okay, this is, dare I say it before I even go, I've never been able to juggle, right? I've always wanted to juggle, but I've never put the work to it. So as you were saying, Ben, other studies are being done, right? In this one, scientists found a group of adults who were not jugglers. That's me. Bob, are you in that group with me?
I can juggle scarves.
Okay, got it. Good. All right, excellent. Ben, you a juggler?
Yeah, I can juggle.
Okay, all right. So I'm in one class. Bob's in the middle because he's always that way, and then you're on the other side, right? They taught half how to practice juggling in the right way. These people practiced for a long time and got much better at juggling. The other half didn't practice and didn't get better. Okay, next, the scientists used a brain scanner to compare the brains of the groups. So we had group 1 that practiced and got better, group 2 that didn't practice and didn't get better.
Chad.
That's me.
Yeah.
Right, I'm in that
2.
group. Right. Okay, they found that the people who learned how to juggle actually grew parts of their brain that controlled juggling skills. Now, did you know that there was a part of your brain that controlled juggling skills?
We did. You didn't.
Right. No,
hand-eye coordination.
Right?
I would call it hand-eye coordination.
Yes,
they call it like the visual or the motor skill areas of your brain.
There you go. Absolutely, right? Their brains changed. They actually had more ability. And this was surprising because these people said before the study that they couldn't juggle. Just like people say, I'm not good at math, as you were talking about, Ben, right? When they learned good strategies for practicing and kept attempting, they actually learned how to do the skill and grew their brains. So again, we're back to that concept of building the muscles. We're back to that concept of growing the hippocampus that we saw for the cab drivers. Now we're showing that even just training how to juggle can do the same thing and help us build that visual and motor skill area of our brain.
What they said is that learning something as simple as juggling causes permanent changes to our brain, and that the juggler's brain cells get larger and grow connections between them. These new, stronger connections make the juggler's brain stronger, smarter, just like a weightlifter's toned muscles. Now,
At least I got the second half of that sentence.
Got to go back to high school. This is circa 90s, right?
Sure, we won't say when.
I'm working at the Everett Mall, GNC, the vitamin store, which, by the way, I have lots of vitamin knowledge in my brain. If you guys ever need vitamin knowledge, I know that red raspberry leaf tea is supposed to promote a pregnancy from happening, birth from happening, like all these different things. Just nonsense I've learned from
That
from
you can't get out of your brain.
Yeah, from my time at GNC. However, the mall during the week, during the winter, was extremely slow.
Oh.
And you would stand there, right? Just wondering if somebody was going to come in or hoping that somebody pretty would walk by and say hi, whatever the case might be. So what I started doing is I started taking these lotion jars of aloe and vitamin whatever, and I started juggling. I just 2 at a time, and then 3 at a time, and every once in a while I'd hit the ground and lotion and stuff would go flying all the way across the mall floor. So I trained my brain. Maybe that's why I have such a big brain today, Chad.
There you go.
GNC time, learning to juggle. I've increased the size of my juggle parts of my brain, as that may be.
All right, but if you're going to go throw a football, Ben might not be the guy you want to throw with. He doesn't have all those visual motor skills in play.
No, throwing is okay. It's catching it.
It's the catching that you're going to throw with. Okay.
I wonder, it makes me wonder, like, does the juggler now pick up other things that are hand-eye coordinated type things easier, right? Does like developing that part of his brain make it easier for me to to do other things that use those same skills.
Yeah, maybe. In fact, scientists found that learning to juggle is just like getting better at math. When people learn and practice new ways of doing algebra, calculus, statistics, whatever it might be, they grow their brains just like the juggler. And even if they hadn't done well in the past, strengthening the math or the vocabulary or the spelling parts of your brains happens when you try to do more challenging math problems. Doesn't that kind of remind you of those that work out and they lift the same amount of weight every single time they go to the gym? Normally 245-pound weights on the end of a bench thing, right? Oh. Every single time. They can do it, and they can do it a lot of times, but they can never do any more.
Right.
They're never training themselves with a little bit more challenge.
Yeah, what would happen, Ben, if they were, just watching someone who lifted heavier? Is that going to do anything for them?
Nope.
Okay, what if they read Schwarzenegger's book on getting pumped? Is that going to make them stronger?
Nope.
So what you're telling me is it doesn't matter these other ways. Reading is important. We understand that, to learn some of these strategies. Watching other people, we're going to learn things. What you're saying, though, is to actually grow the muscle, we have to actually put that stress upon the muscle to challenge it to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. That you have to do those activities in a challenging way, and you have to have a good strategy or process. Like I could continue to try to do calculus, right? And I could do it over and over and over again. And it may not improve my ability to do calculus unless I learn a good process for doing that, a good model or a system. The point is today that there's a massive list of things that we could do that would help us grow our brains, and that we can't resort back to my comment, which is I'm not very good at math, or I can't spell gooder. And there's lots of these sorts of things that you can't do. Basically what we're saying is I haven't exercised that part of my brain.
Right. Stop yelling at us, for those of you listening, saying, well, guys, stop saying you can't do something, because you're the guys who would always tell us you can do anything that you want to. We have chosen not to at this point.
And I think about all the kids that come home and say, I'm no good at math, or I'm no good at spelling, or I'm no good at whatever that might be. What they need is they need more effort with a good strategy or process multiplied by time on task. Just like we do, we all have to grow those skill sets in our brains. So as we end today's session.
Can we have a list? How about a list?
That's what I was thinking, is that we should really think about what are some things that we could do to grow our brains. Does that seem like a...
As long as there's a list involved, I'm okay with this. So let's just do it in a list format.
Okay. So how much time every single day are you going to commit to learning something new or something challenging? And if you were in part of the Wealth series, you would have understood and learned about compounding. Knowledge has the same impact. One new word learned every day for a whole year, it entirely changes your vocabulary, right? Bob has a much better vocabulary than me, but I could beat him if I learned one new word every single day for a year, as long as he wasn't learning one or two on that journey.
So now I know what to get you for Christmas this year. It's that calendar that has the word of the day.
We're perfect.
Got it. All right.
How long do we need?
15 minutes? 20 minutes?
5 minutes is better than what you've been doing.
There you go.
10 minutes. Here's what I started a couple years ago, is I try to listen to a book or a podcast for 10 to 15 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. On my drive to work, while I'm in the shower, on my lunch break, at home, right before bed. 10 to 15 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day, will change your life.
Okay. Bob, you got something to add to the list?
Limit television and video games. This hurts me immensely. And the reason would be I've got young children, and it's the Corona season, and they can't do all the same things that we would generally have them out there learning and doing, right? Swimming lessons and soccer practice and all these different things. And so the natural thing to want to do is give that kid an iPad, right? And one of the things that my wife and I inside of that have tried to do is, like, they can have a little bit of YouTube. Well, one of them likes to watch Toy Batman, right? So he can watch a little bit of Toy Batman after he does some of his learning games on the iPad. So even when we give him the iPad, right, the video game or whatever, we want to try to make learning a part of that. So, and I think most of us, if we were to take 15 minutes of TV time every day, which I know every one of us have, or most of us do, right? And turn that into Ben's approach, podcast, reading a book for 15 minutes. Like at the end of a year, it's going to be dramatically different outcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How about another one? What if we change the conversations we're having?
Oh,
What if we just tried for 5 or 10 minutes a day with your spouse, your honey money, your partner, your friend, your coworker? You just had an in-depth conversation where you asked them something and you got to learn about something. How does that work? Explain that to me. What do you think about? What you just learn something.
okay. I got one to add to the list. It's cultivate smart friends. Right? So it's why I'm here. It's to be around you guys, and it's to make sure that you're around people who are smarter than you, because people are contagious. And now all of a sudden, I'm going to grow my brain to keep up with you guys. Going to the gym, lift with the guy who's stronger. You're going to push yourself to get to that level as well.
I'd say change what you learn. I don't know how many times people read the same exact leadership books every year written by the same exact author, instead of going out there and saying, you know what I should read about is an entirely different industry. How are you going to get better in your industry if you only ever read about your industry? Go read about how Airbnb or Netflix or Amazon or somebody else changed their world or changed their business, right? Change the industry or change the type of content that you consume and get it outside of your normal box.
Which, Ben, would lead to another one that would make a list following that, which would be break the routine of your life to stimulate other parts of your brain. Right? We are so routine. We do the same thing the same way. What if you just broke the routine on something, learned a new recipe, took a class about something completely different, did something, just read a dictionary instead of just reading a book for that day? Who knows what you're going to stimulate in your brain just by teaching it new connections?
Chad, I mentioned that English is not one of my strong suits. I'm actually pretty good with words. And one of the reasons for that, I had a cousin when I was young that had muscular dystrophy. So he was in a wheelchair. He was about 8 years older than I was. So when he was like 16, I was 8 years old, and he couldn't do much. We would play chess, and we would read out of the dictionary, and he would give me a word, and then I'd have to make up a definition. I didn't know any of the definition, but I would make up a definition. He'd say, "Oh, you're wrong," and then he'd read me the real definition. But I learned a lot of words in a year of doing that with my cousin Eddie, right? Here's my next one would be, because I'm a sports fan, there's a quote from one of the great NFL coaches of all time, Vince Lombardi, that says, practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. And one of the things in that Juggler survey that we read about, or study that we read about, was the idea of giving them the right way to practice, right? They would give them the right techniques to go out, and they were able to learn and grow their brain because they were doing the right type of practice. I grew up in sports, and there's a right way to shoot a basketball. And if you went out and did, 100 shots the wrong way, that's not going to be as good as practicing the right way. So I think, like, if you're going to put time into these things, like, find the process that's the right process.
I got one last one for us, unless Chad has an additional one that he wants to add. But here's my last comment. Teach somebody else how to do something, even if you don't know how. There will be nothing that allows your brain to grow more than coming up with a way to explain it to somebody else. It forces you to master something, to learn something, to prepare. Just like this podcast does for us, right? Yeah. It increases the size of our brain and our knowledge.
Okay, so I want to recap the list for everybody so they know the things they can do to make their brain grow, okay? 1, assign time to learn every day. 2, remove some of that television and video game from your world. 3, alter the conversations that you're having. 4, find smarter friends. 5, change the things you're learning. 6, break habits, create new routines. 7, perfect practice makes perfect, as Bob was reminding us. And 8, Ben, you just brought up for us, teach it to someone else.
Now, in our next episode, we're going to teach you not about the brain, but about your thoughts and how to change your negative or limiting thoughts into something entirely different. We call that reframing. So I hope you listen to the next one, just like you listen to this one. And how do we end every podcast?
We hope that you will reframe and join us on the next one as we jump into another conversation about how things are happening upstairs in your head on the Win, Make, Give podcast. Make sure you remember to join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/Win, Make, Give. Make sure you've subscribed and hopefully you've given us a rating and a review by now. And we challenge you before the next episode, invite someone to the podcast. Send them the link to one of your favorite episodes. Share it with them so they can jump into the conversations that you're having and you can help be that smarter friend in their world. Until our next episode, remember, wash your hands, and as always, do good.